What's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of Unfabricated. I have a very special guest with me. This is your America's favorite divorced couple. Introduce yourself for the people out there who are watching.
Eileen.
So, we are here today. I am doing this series. Actually, it was only supposed to be a couple of episodes, to be honest with you. I was never intending for this to be something that kind of went on and on and on. But here's the problem is that there's a lot of it. Like there's so much hurt out there and there's so much trauma out there that this particular topic just keeps going. It took on like a life of itself, and there's so many different people that want to tell their story, and I think that it's good. Um, I think that there's been a lot of cover-ups that's happened over the years. And I know that there's been a lot of covering up that's been happening over the years, and people have been left very hurt and very disgruntled and very disenfranchised and very confused. And so I wanted to create an atmosphere where there is no toxicity. Can I set the record straight for that? That this is not a place for toxicity. This is not a place for gossip. This is not a place for tearing down a particular person or a particular ministry. That's why we leave names out of it. This is about bettering, helping, and healing. That's all we here for. That's all I care about. So for this podcast, for this stream, which is generated by me, that's what it's going to come up. That's what I want to come from it. So if you're going to come here looking for information, looking for gossip, looking for pillow talk, you're probably not going to get it. You're going to be very disappointed. But if you come here and you're honestly looking to help fix a problem that is running all throughout the church, the cover up culture, this culture that has created a soft place for a lot of sexual predators. It's created a soft place for a lot of manipulation. It's created a soft place for a lot of tearing down of individuals. And it's left, like I said, it's left a lot of people very confused because the church is supposed to be the safest place on earth. And it's proven to be anything but that. And so if the church isn't safe, then where is safe? So I'm not going to make this about me. I'm not going to talk a lot. I'm going to give the floor to Eileen. And Eileen, you have a story to tell. I know it. I've heard it, and I want the people to know exactly as much as you feel comfortable sharing about your experience, and what you've gone through, and how you have managed it, how you have navigated the emotions, what you've gotten from it, what you've learned from it, how it's hurt you, how it's helped you, whatever it is you feel comfortable sharing. The floor is yours.
Um, well, I'm pretty sure most people by now have read my post.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, they have.
it kind of spread faster than I thought it would. I didn't even think that anybody was going to read it, to be honest. I don't know if that sounds crazy, but it was so long. Um, I really didn't think that it was going to get really read full through, let alone the responses that I got.
Mm.
Um,
But why do you think that is, though? Why do you think that people actually read the whole? Because it was long, and people don't have good long attention spans anymore.
mm-mm.
What do you think? What do you think kept them engaged in what it was you wrote?
I think it was relevant to what is
Mm,
happening.
mm.
Um, to it's very prevalent to what's going on in the moment. Um, Maybe some people are just nosy.
That's fine.
No,
That's true, and that's all right.
um, and or just interested, in hearing one story and then to hear another story. And um, I mean, I didn't think they would, but they did. Um, I'm happy they did.
Yeah,
You know, I
me too.
am. It was nerve wracking for me to put out there. It was it
What
wasn't
what
an
stop there. Why was it so nerve-wracking? And then we'll go into what exactly we're talking about. But why was it so nerve-wracking just to share your story to
um
you?
it's it's not just one reason. There's a lot of different reasons.
Hmm.
One, I think it's nerve wracking just on any victim level. Is always nerve-wracking to speak about what was done to you. Um, Only because it causes you now to have to relive some things, to go back and now think about things that you've worked so hard to move past.
Hmm.
Um, so I think on that level, it was hard. Um, and um, because it took place, a lot of it did take place within the church. That was also hard. Um, and in feeling like you have to protect certain people, I think that was my major issue. That was my major.
So
That
you
was
felt like you had to, like, it was your responsibility to protect those that I guess victimized you is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I don't know if that might sound a little twisted, but yeah, in some way I kind of felt like, it was my responsibility to kind of cover, and if I spoke, then, what if, even if I didn't name names, it was the possibility of, well, what if they figure it out, and I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to cause anybody any more difficulty. I don't want to come across bitter. I don't want to come across angry. And, you have all these kinds of things just bouncing around in your head.
Hmm.
Um, and the bottom line for me, um, after it was all typed out and I read it about a gazillion times and I sent it to, I sent to you to read, um, and to my best friend Liza to read, um, just to kind of give me some feedback. Um, and it's funny because you and Liza don't know each other, so you guys don't talk, and you both said the same, almost the same thing to me, that it was perfectly written, um and that I didn't sound bitter. That was one of the things that was so important to me, that I didn't come across as bitter, but I really wanted to read my heart in it.
So I guess let's go into what exactly happened, because some people don't know. So what is it that you are referring to? What is it that brought you to this place, that you felt like you needed to first tell your story and then cover the people who were behind the story?
What do you mean?
So let's just start with what happened. What is it that happened exactly?
um
Or however much you feel comfortable with.
mhm. I was sexually abused when I was very young, about 8 or 9 years old. It was done by somebody who was only a few years older than me. Um, they went to we all went to the same church, um, and I didn't speak on it until I was about 14 years old, and throughout that time it was happening. So from the
So
time
that's
I was
about what, a
about
7 year, it's about a 7 year span?
6, 7 years.
6, 7 years. Wow. Hmm.
Mhm. Um, and I came forward and I told my father, you know, what was happening. And, they went to leadership, and leadership, was very gracious with me. They got me help that I needed. They were very loving with me. I don't want to paint a picture like they weren't.
Hmm.
Um, and I I want to take a pause though for a second. I just want to clear something up, and then we can get back to what I'm saying. I'm not name dropping at all, and I'm not here to, name drop. But I am gonna say, because there's so much bouncing around about Christopher Durso, it was not him. This was not.
Set the record straight. It was not
This
Chris
was
Durso.
not him. This was not Christopher Durso. He was a baby.
Had nothing to do with him.
Nothing to do with him. No.
Got it.
So
You went to leadership.
and they got me counseling, and I saw a therapist for quite a while. And I genuinely, I was, God dealt with a lot of that at that time, from that abuse through the therapist, and through the leadership at the church. And my parents are amazing. But he never left the church. He stood there.
To be clear, the person who did this to you was still at the church.
Yes, still remained in the church. And then time went on. I went through high school. I graduated.
So how did they deal with the person who did this to you?
The first time, I believe that they got counseling as well. I was also young that first time. I don't really remember. I don't really know the extent of the counseling or anything like that. But I do know that they were not removed from the church. They remained in the church. They got counseling. They were apologetic. I want to state that, because I just want I want to be very honest and open, and they were, and it really helped me at that time to to kind of move past what was happening, what had happened, my high school years were very happy years. Not a lot of teenagers could say that, and I could, and it was due to the counseling that I got, because my childhood was very tough behind the abuse.
Right.
But there was a kind of having to deal with the fact that he was still around, that he was never really removed.
So then a couple of years go by, and then what happens?
It happened again. He had assaulted me again. I was 19, I believe. I had just finished my first year of college. Yeah, and it happened again, and I think that second time around is what probably rattled me the most. Yeah.
Why do you think it was the second time around? If you can conceptualize that, what do you think was it about that particular time that made it so hard?
I think it was the shock of what happened, the betrayal, the I trusted you, the I thought I caught past this, all this, what's wrong with me? Why am I a target? I felt embarrassed, stupid, because I had trusted this person, and it happened again. It was.
Go ahead.
Mhm.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm just thinking. Go ahead.
It was and it was also uh I think that it was how it was handled that also really that it really played a major part in my emotional state.
What do you mean by that?
The fact that he when I spoke up immediately after. It happened on a Saturday. I spoke up on a Sunday. It wasn't something that I sat on. It wasn't something that I allowed to happen again. I spoke up immediately. Um, and for lack of a better term, nothing really happened to him.
Mm.
No.
Again.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's they remained in the church. And I think, um, behind being traumatized the second time with what happened, kind of brought up all the feelings from when I was a kid, really kind of undid all that other stuff that I thought that I had worked through. And now I couldn't find the space to work through it again with him still around.
Mm.
It was not, there was no room for it for me. And it was too much for me.
And so what happened?
I had to leave. If he wasn't removed, and I remember sitting in a Sunday service. I don't know how much time had passed. It may not have been that much. It was just a summer, um, and I remember feeling like very numb and very disconnected from myself. Um, and I remember just sitting there and just saying, "There's no way I'm making it out of this time. Okay, there's no way that I'm going to be able to get to a point of healing and be okay sharing a space with him. There's no way I'm going to be able to do this, and I will backslide." And I told the Lord, if you do not do something, I do not see me being okay. I just don't. And it it felt like days from that Sunday to me packing up and going to Elam. And that's what I did. I left and I went away to Bible school. And Elam was everything I shouldn't have needed.
Mm.
Um,
Elam was everything you shouldn't have needed. That's deep. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. Um, it became a place of refuge for me. A place of healing, a place of growth. It was very hard. I had a lot of I had a lot of dark moments um, at Elam. Um, there was a very deep work that God did in me there, and I believe that I was I was truly healed. God truly healed me and did a work in me there, because it wasn't going to happen where I was at.
I guess to understand the timeline, you were molested as a kid.
Mhm.
The person remained. You were attacked. The person remained, and you had to leave. Am I
Mhm.
conceptualizing that right? And
Yeah.
when you came back, what happened?
Um, when I came back, after 3 years. I was, in and out visiting, but I remained at Elam for a good 2.5 years, 3 years. And when I came back, they were in leadership at the church.
To be clear, the person who assaulted you is now a leader at the church that you attend.
Yes.
And the head pastors and the pastors knew that this is what happened.
Yes.
Okay. So how did you navigate that? Because now this person's in power.
Yes.
So now the person who assaulted you has power.
Yes.
How do you navigate something like that?
With a lot of grace.
What does that mean? What does that mean? Can you expound a bit on what that means?
When you I had to learn how to adapt to my surroundings. The major part of my healing was done. God removed me. He sent me to Elam. And a major part of my growth and a major part of my healing was done there, was done in that place. A freedom for me. I felt such a freedom at Elam. God had really really freed me in a way I'd never experienced before that. And it was very important to me that I not lose that. And I not lose myself and what God did in me at Elam and in that space. And coming back and knowing what I was coming back to, knowing knowing that they were still there, and they still had, and now they held a certain place in leadership. And it's just okay. Now you keep your distance, and you keep your guard up. And my mom is one of the things my mom has always taught me was, what, Eileen, you walk with your head held high regardless of what's going on around you. And that's kind of the stance that I had to take.
Can I ask a question? You said it's the stance you had to take. Why not go to another church?
Never even, I don't even think it dawned on me to do that. This was a place where I grew up in. It was a place where that my parents went. I cannot deny what God even did in the time that I was in the church, what God was doing at the time.
So would you categorize this church as a good church?
Yes. I don't want to say that it wasn't. I don't want to say that the pastor was this horrible monster and he was this ogre who he was not. He was not. I love him with all my heart. I love him. You know, I just think that there were decisions that were made that were not theirs to make.
Mm.
Um,
Mm. Oh, expound on that, please. There were decisions that were made that was not theirs to make. What do you mean by that?
I said it in my post, when I was typing out my story, when victims of abuse should never be left out of the decision-making process.
So you were left out of the decision-making process.
I was never asked how I wanted this to go. I was never asked what I wanted. Me or my family. We were never asked how we wanted it to proceed. It was kind of like, okay, this is what's going to happen and this is what we're going to do. And we kind of just complied with it, out of wanting to be obedient to the Lord, wanting to be obedient to leadership, wanting to do the right thing, not wanting to act out of bitterness, not wanting to seem like we were angry or going against anybody, but really kind of taking the low road. And when I think back on that, that was not the position we should have even been in. It wasn't ever, it shouldn't have been a choice that was taken from us and made for us, and made for me, after I was already 19. We were talking earlier this week, and I had shared with you that when a woman is raped and she goes into a hospital, before they even give her a rape kit, they ask her questions every single step of the way. They're asking her, making sure that she understands what's happening, making sure that she is given the choice. Do you want to continue? This is what's going to happen. Is it okay if I do this? And not that I was
give that person the power,
but yes, you giving the victim back the power that was just taken away from them. And not that I was raped. I don't want anybody to misunderstand, because that's not what happened. But when you're assaulted in any kind of way, in any kind of level, your power is ripped from you. And when you speak up, you're speaking up to kind of gain that power back. And when decisions are made for you, it kind of takes it away a little bit, so
an already fragile state.
Fragile state. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. So yeah, it was difficult to kind of find my footing, when I came back. It wasn't an easy process. I think for me, in order to get through it, I didn't deal with it. I kind of pushed it back. Like, I kind of, it was almost like, oh, Eileen, if you're not comfortable, you didn't forgive. Oh, Eileen, if you're feeling some kind of way, then you got to check that. That might be bitterness. And I kind of just ignored it.
Right. You masked the issue.
I masked the issue.
Spirituality.
I tried to normalize the situation as best I could in order to adapt.
Right.
To what was going on around me.
I find it interesting that the church is supposed to be a hospital, right? That's what it is. A church is a hospital. People who come in are coming in for a particular reason. Whatever reason it is, you find yourself in a church because you're sick, because you're hurting. And to me, sometimes it becomes amazing how we have these issues that we mask with spirituality. And it's so easy to do that. Like, it's so easy. It's so easy to say, when you're the victim, you know, watch your bitterness and you should forgive. But forgiveness has nothing to do with consequence. And I
Right.
think sometimes we miss that part.
Right. Right. It was, you know, it took me a while to accept that it's okay that I didn't want to be around this person. That's okay.
Should be
You know,
common
and
sense.
I want to be, it should be common sense, you know, and I want to be clear. It never happened again. It never happened again.
Yeah, but it happened twice. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Let me
No, no,
not
no. It never
interject. Go
happened
ahead. I'm sorry.
after that night, after 19, it never happened again. So it was easy for me to rationalize in my head that, you know, you need to operate in forgiveness.
Move past this.
You need to operate in love. You know, and that's almost a very twisted way of thinking.
Not almost. It is.
It is a very
Sorry,
twisted way.
Keep trying. Go ahead. Finish what
It
you're
is
saying.
a very twisted way of thinking because it was perfectly normal for me to feel like I don't want to be in the same space as him. I'm not 100% comfortable, you know, here in this space. And it's not because he was doing stuff. No, it was just, you know, no matter how much you try, you know, it's still a reminder of what happened.
It's a trauma.
It's a trauma. It's a trauma.
I think sometimes we have this pray it away mentality. And when it comes to, not sometimes, a lot of times, and when it comes to trauma, it's not that simple. And we almost have this Herculean vision of some of these prayer warriors. And it's like, wow, I want to be like them because whatever problem they face, they pray so well that the problem goes away. And there are just some things that you can't do that with. And I think this is being one of them. That there is no, and this is not to say God doesn't have the power. No, God has equipped us with tools to guide us through these traumas that should be utilized. Praying it away is doing exactly the opposite. It masks these issues.
Right.
It masks these traumas, and you carry them with you for the rest of your life in the illusion of healing, in the illusion of restoration. You tell yourself God restored all the years that the locusts have eaten, yet in reality, you're still carrying the trauma. You just know the right things to say to yourself and to others that make it not look like so.
Right.
I think that's the danger that we face or that we're facing, right? Because we give so much power to one person to make a decision that will impact our lives. And most of the time, if they're a good person, and the Bible doesn't even say there's a such thing as a good person, which I'll get into. But, you know, if they're a good pastor, then, you know, they'll make the right decision 80% of the time. But 20% is a big number of people who are being devastated.
Right.
If the Bible says that the shepherd leaves the 99 for the one, and that God has every hair, think about that, every hair on your head numbered, then there is no, well, my numbers are great because most people are getting healed, most people are being helped. And that's what most people will say, right? There's no perfect church. That's what people are saying right now. Oh, there's no perfect church. There's no perfect pastor. This, to me, is the issue with putting so much power in one person.
Right.
But again, I'm getting sidetracked. Please finish please finish your story.
You know, anyway, you asked that how I adapted, and that's how I adapted. That's how, you know, and you know, I was involved in the youth ministry. So, you know, we had so many different you know, we visited so many churches, you know, so many different places, and we went, you know, all over, and I never found a church like the one I was in, or a pastor like the one I had. So, I didn't want to leave there,
Because it was a
and
good church.
it
God was
was
moving in this church.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, so I kind of willed myself to just adopt, and it wasn't until I, um, left, and hindsight is always 2020, right? When you come out of something, then you kind of see things a little bit differently. And I started to see things a little differently. And even in my response, I didn't want to join ministry anymore. And, I tried, but I wasn't feeling connected, and I wasn't feeling, so willing to trust, or, I was struggling with all these things that I had never struggled with before, and,
Did God feel far from you?
no,
Mm.
no, no. I wasn't struggling with feeling far from the Lord. I wasn't struggling with feeling angry at the Lord. I wasn't struggling with any of those things. I was struggling to connect to the body.
Mm.
I was struggling to trust people, to leadership people. I found myself struggling, and even now. Um, and it wasn't until probably the past couple of months, or maybe even the past year, or maybe a little bit more, since COVID, I want to say, when everything locked down and we were all at home and had nothing better to do but to reflect on our own lives, is when I started to see the cracks that I didn't see before, in my own life. And it's kind of like a broken bone, right? You break a bone and it doesn't, like, you don't get it set right. And so it heals. It
Right.
heals, but it didn't heal the way that it should have healed. It wasn't. It's not quite the same. It's functioning, but it's not functioning the way it really should. And now you gotta, if you want it to kind of heal the right way, you have to set it the right way. And in order to set it the right way, so it could heal the right way, you got to break it.
And that's
And
even more painful than the first break.
right, right,
That's a great analogy.
right.
That is a great analogy, because I see that, and a lot of people, they live in the broken, healed process where they
Right.
walk with a limp.
Right.
But because they can walk, it's I'm totally delivered. And it's like, yeah,
Right.
but something's off now.
Right. Right.
I guess to what am I trying to get at here? And so David, right? David is the most mentioned person in the Bible. David is the most famous person
Yeah.
in the Bible. David is the most popular character in the Bible. The Bible says that David was a man after God's own heart. When you talk to theologians and you want to get all super Bible-y, they will say that he was a Christ type, right? Like he was as close to Jesus as a human being can
Can get.
possibly be.
Right.
That's what most Christians and theologians, beyond even Christianity, Jews, Muslims, we all can agree that David was probably the greatest man to ever walk this earth. Let me bring that into perspective. The Israelites were roaming around and they were defeating all these armies, and all the armies that they were defeating had kings. Israel didn't have a king. Israel was operating solely by God. God was their king. But they saw all the kings that all the other nations had. And they said, God, we want a king. And God said, you sure you want a king? And Israel said, God, we want a king. And God said, I don't think you know what you're asking for. I'm your king. I'm not good enough. And Israel's like, but everybody else has kings, God. We want a king too. And God said, you'll rule the day that you ask for a king. But if you want a king, I'm not the type of God who's gonna, you know what I'm saying, deny you what you want. You want a king? Fine. I'm gonna give you a king. A couple of kings go by, we get to David, right? So let's stick to the most perfect, because I think it's very important that you pointed out that this was a good church, that this was a church where God was moving in, and that the pastor of this church is a man of God. He's not evil. He's not out to get people. He helps a lot more people than he hurts.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about David. David is this great, wonderful king. Doing all Israel has never been more prosperous. Then David has a moment. He sees Bathsheba. We all know the story. Or those of us who don't, I'll tell you. So this great man of God sees this woman naked, bathing. He's like, I need to hit that. I want some of that. I'm the king, right? I got the power to go get that. This woman's married. He's like, no problem. I'm king. Tell her husband to go to the front lines of the war, because there was a war going on, right? So his people was out fighting for him. Her husband was fighting for him.
Right.
The woman that he was trying to get, her husband is fighting for him.
Right.
And he says, so this is all premeditated. So this wasn't like a moment of weakness.
Right.
Let's get this straight.
No, it was thought out.
He thought about this. He schemed this out.
Right.
He said, send her husband to the front of the battle, to the heat of the battle. And then when you do that, draw everybody back. And her husband, Uriah, fought fiercely, gets killed in battle. So now David got his chance. So he gets with Bathsheba and he impregnates her. And God takes the baby. So with his one bad decision, 2 people died.
Right.
2 people died because of his bad decision. He had Israel in a place where it was rich, where it was prosperous, but 2 people died because he had a moment or some moments of weakness, right? Let's go a little further. He repents. He says, God, I'm sorry. God forgives him. There is consequence. Another key point. David did not escape the consequence for his bad decision. That child that he impregnated her with was a son, which at that time was a big deal, was taken, died.
Right.
So there was consequence. But God still said, he's a man after my own heart. Some years go by. David's old now. Pride is set in his heart. David's feeling himself. I am a great king. Look at all I did. I'm doing great. So David gets into a war that he should have never gotten into. And because of his pride, 70,000 of his men die. So with 2 bad decisions, 70,002 people die. Now, David is still considered a great man. This is not to say David was an evil man.
Right.
David was still considered the closest Christ-like person ever to walk this earth. So the closest person to ever walk this earth to Jesus-like has had 70,002 people's deaths. That's 70,000 mothers, children that are never going to see their fathers and these people again. Conceptualize that.
Right.
God said, you're going to rule the day you ask for a king, because the best king makes catastrophic mistakes.
Right.
We've come to a place where we've just come to accept it.
Right.
People get hurt. People get destroyed. Lives are I need y'all to understand something. When a person puts their trust in a church, when a person puts their trust in a pastor, and you're going to say, oh, well, Christian, you're supposed to put your trust in God, not man. In facto changeo, when you go to a church, they tell you put your trust in God, and then the pastor trust the pastor because he hears from God. So you're supposed to follow the pastor's rule. You're supposed to follow what the pastor says because you're supposed to trust that he's hearing from God. So in facto changeo, you're trusting a man. Let's all stop fronting like we're not.
Right.
And you put all your trust into a man who at any moment with a bad decision can destroy that whole thing. Ladies and gentlemen, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with the structure. I'm sorry. There is something wrong with the structure. God warned us from the very beginning that this is what we were going to get. If you're going to create an atmosphere where you need a king, you are going to regret. You know what? Let's take our great quote unquote country, right? Because everybody loves America. So let's talk about America. What happened? We saw that being under the rule of King Henry I think it was third, whatever it was, but being under the rule of a king was not working. It wasn't working for us. So we created a system with checks and balances. We created a system where one king doesn't rule over everybody, that we have a system where there's checks and balances. Trust me, we can get into how well it works. I'm not going to, but let's just take that. It's a whole nother conversation. But let's just stick with the ideology of it all. We don't want one person to dictate everything.
Right.
So why is it that we think in the church a system where one person dictates everything is ever going to work? We had a church that I can attest is and was a great church. And even in that atmosphere, how many lives have been destroyed? How many lives have been so heinously hurt? The point of this thing here is for people like us who have been hurt, because it's almost now becoming a term, church hurt. And so what happens is we label it and then we dismiss. Oh, that's just church hurt. Dismissed. Oh, they're just operating in church hurt. Dismissed. Right. And it's like, wait a second. You are dismissing actual pain. You are dismissing something that is real to the people who are going through it. I am sorry, but the fact that this happened to you twice, and then the person is in leadership and you have to go away to college is freaking ridiculous to me. And I want to use another word, but I won't. It's ridiculous. And then you have to conceptualize as the victim forgiveness and grace and tolerance and not being bitter and all of this BS where it's like common sense says to remove this individual. But the power was in the hands of a man who made the wrong decision. Because we place too much power in the hands of one man. And I'll say it again. It's not fair to these pastors. This isn't me saying pastors are evil. This isn't me saying pastors sit around a round table and try to think about ways to destroy people. But the system that they have bought into, it's not conducive for one man to carry this whole load on his own. The structure has to mistake. The structure has
to change.
There needs to be checks and balances. Well, Christian, you know, there are some churches, I'm sure there are, but we all know by and far that the structure is the same. You have a pastor whose head, he might have a soft board that he answers to, but for the most part, he is the head making every decision for people. I'll never forget, I wanted to move away. I wanted to go to Ohio, and I had to go to the pastor to ask for permission to move to Ohio. And the pastor said no. And I said, with all due respect, I'm doing it anyway. It's my life. I was called everything in the book because I decided for myself what to do. And this is what I'm saying, that there's something wrong with this structure. This culture that covers up these things is hurting a lot of people. If it was just this church, that'd be fine. If it was it's not. This is rampant.
It's not. This isn't an isolated issue to one church. This is something that I've found in speaking to different people that don't even live in the state. That this is not just something that happens just here in one church. This is the church. This is, when I say the church, I mean the church, the whole church,
system, the whole system.
The whole system. It's something.
And to be clear, this is nothing wrong with God. This is not here saying, oh, if you put your trust to the church and God, then you're stupid. No, we are, and this is the atmosphere that I wanted to make, because there are those of us who've been hurt and recognize God did not hurt me.
Right.
This is not you, God, hurting me.
Right.
There is something wrong with the structure that we have that is hurting me. Right. And that is not just hurting me, but that is hurting the masses.
Right.
So wouldn't it make sense to change that?
Right.
Wouldn't it make sense to see what the common denominator is and try to tackle that issue?
Right.
Not just chalk it up to, well, the numbers say most people are hurt. Most people are helped more than it's hurt. So you got to pay the toll. There are a few that are going to fall through the cracks, is what they say. I don't accept that.
No, especially when it comes to something like abuse. It's never something that should just be accepted as casualties,
collateral damage.
As collateral damage, I don't think that there's ever that's never something that should be compromised, and that should just be accepted as, well, this just happens, it's kind of like it happened in the Catholic Church. How can it not happen, in the Christian church? And, it's not something that should be accepted, and not that I'm saying it's accepted, like, oh yeah, it just happened, so just let it happen. But, when it's dealt with in such a discreet way,
it's often dealt with in a discreet way.
Yes.
These people, let's be clear. These people in the world would have to go to jail and register as sex offenders. But in the church, they get to go and be leaders.
Yes.
Yeah. So does it not, do you not think that there are people who see this and say, oh man, I'm dealing with this issue. A church is a safe place for me.
Right.
We've kind of created a safe place for these people.
Right.
To operate.
Right. Because they can hide behind the forgiveness
and not deal with consequences. And they feel bad for whatever it is they do. That's why they're able to cry and seem like they're, repentant, and then do it again, because they know that it's an issue, but they also know that they're not going to face the consequences that they would normally face if they did it in their workplace or if they did it outside the church. I fully believe that. And I feel like, again, there needs to be a change to this system. Some simple changes, like if there is this type of thing that gets brought up, it's taken out of the hands of the pastor as to what to do. And like you said, the power is given to the victim as to how they want to proceed and move forward.
Right.
That's one simple fix.
Yes. Which is a large part of what drove me to even be here and to post my story, was because I felt like for so long I lived in this notion that I had to keep silent. And if I ever spoke up, I was bitter, or I wasn't, I really didn't forgive, or I really wasn't healed, or, this responsibility of feeling like, you have to kind of cover. And no, if I want to speak it, it's my story to speak, because I'm the victim. It happened to me. And this is my step in taking my power back and taking my voice back and saying, you know what? Yes, this happened to me. That there needs to be a change in how these issues are handled. There needs to be a change in how these things are dealt with. The victim should never be held responsible for what happens to the abuser if they choose to speak. That should never be something placed on the victim of abuse. Just never, And if I speak it now and I never speak it again. That's my choice. Now it's my choice. Now I've done it to stay silent because that's what I have chosen to do, not out of some kind of misguided obligation.
Right. Right.
No.
I think, well, let me just say before we, is there anything, you said a lot to people, but is there anything directly you would like to say to somebody who might be struggling in your shoes, who's dealt with what you've dealt with?
I would like to, just encourage anybody who's gone through what I've gone through. If you haven't spoken, if this is something that you've kept to yourself, you've never even spoke it once, my prayer is that you find the strength to speak it to somebody, that you tell someone, that God somehow gives you the strength to find your voice and speak up for yourself. And you don't have to live in shame and in secret, because you've done nothing wrong. You've done nothing wrong. And chances are you have more support than you think.
Wow. Eileen, this was incredibly, and I think anybody would agree that this was incredibly brave. We've had conversations, and you know me, I'm just Mr. Let's go, let's talk about it, let's burn the whole thing down. Where's the match? Let's go and take pitchforks and go take everybody out. Let's name every name possible. and you really thought about this, and you handled it with a lot of class, and a lot of bravery, because this is not easy. This is not something that is to be taken lightly or flippantly. And I appreciate that you've done this, because I feel like, and one of the things I was saying was that this was really going to help people. That's my only mission right now, is that people are helped. The people who are forgotten, the people who have,
Right.
quote unquote, fallen through the cracks, that 20% who've
Right.
been hurt and are
Right.
disillusioned.
Right.
I want to talk to them, and I want them to find their place.
Yes.
And I don't want them to follow. I don't want them to follow.
Right.
I don't want them to fall away and think that because of what somebody did, that they have to fall away from the Lord, or feel like they're backslidden, or feel like God's far from them now. You know what I mean? Like,
True.
that's not the case. Fine, you don't go to church no more. That doesn't mean God is far from you. Fine, you're quote unquote in sin. God is not far from you. The Bible says that when you make your depths, over familiarized verse, you made your depths in the pit. That's what it said. That means you made the decision to be there. God is close to you in that place where you chose to be. That's what this is all about.
Right.
And so with that, I hope you guys got something. I hope that you guys can really understand that God is never far. He's never far. No matter what it is, he's never far, and he's not waiting for you to get your act together before he's close. And even when he's close, it's not, I'm close now. Now you have to get your act together, or I'm
Right.
gonna. That's not how it goes either. He's close, point blank, period, end. Sin is defeated. Let's stop operating in the fact like it's not.
Right.
I appreciate you guys spending time with us. I really, really do. And God bless. Have a good night, everybody.